Most people imagine off-grid energy as the ultimate form of independence. No utility bills, no dependence on centralized infrastructure, complete control. And at first, that idea sounds simple. Generate your own power, use what you need, live independently. But once people move beyond the idea and start looking at how off-grid systems actually work, something changes. Because the challenge isn't producing energy. The challenge is replacing everything the grid quietly does in the background. And that's where expectations usually begin to shift. Most people rarely think about the electrical grid when it's working. Power appears instantly, day or night, summer or winter, high demand or low demand. But behind that convenience is a system constantly balancing production, storage, distribution, and stability. When you go off-grid, you inherit all of those responsibilities. And that changes the entire relationship with energy. At first, the biggest challenge seems obvious. Generation. People focus on solar panels, generators, wind, alternative sources. And while generation matters, it's usually not the hardest part. Because generating energy occasionally is different from guaranteeing energy continuously. That's where the hidden layer appears. Storage. Energy produced at the wrong time has limited value. Solar energy at noon doesn't automatically help at midnight. Wind energy during low demand doesn't solve peak consumption. So off-grid systems immediately become storage problems. And storage introduces constraints. Capacity, duration, charging cycles, reserve planning. Suddenly energy becomes less about production, and more about timing. That realization surprises many people, because they expect energy generation to create freedom. Instead, they discover energy management, and management becomes a daily decision. But storage isn't the only challenge. There's variability. Weather changes, seasons change, consumption changes. A system that works comfortably one month may behave completely differently another month. That means off-grid systems often require margin, extra capacity, backup planning, redundancy. Not because systems fail, but because conditions change. And this is where another misunderstanding appears. People often imagine independence as removing limitations. But independence usually means replacing external limits with internal responsibility. The grid absorbs variability. Off-grid systems expose it. And that changes behavior. People begin paying attention to things they previously ignored. When energy is produced. When energy is used. Which devices matter most? What can wait? And that shift creates awareness. Because off-grid living isn't simply about having different equipment. It's about interacting differently with energy itself. There's also maintenance. Every system needs attention. Batteries age. Components wear. Equipment requires monitoring. And unlike grid systems, there's usually less invisible backup behind the scenes. That doesn't mean off-grid systems are fragile. But it does mean reliability becomes more active. And that leads to another important point. Many successful off-grid approaches aren't completely isolated. They're layered. Solar with storage. Storage with backup generation. Hybrid approaches. Not because one solution is weak, but because real-world conditions rarely stay constant. And that brings us to the key turning point. The real issue isn't whether off-grid energy systems work. They do. The real issue is whether people are prepared to manage the responsibilities that come with replacing centralized stability. Once that becomes clear, the conversation changes. Off-grid stops looking like escape, and starts looking like system design, trade-offs, planning, resilience. Because energy independence isn't the absence of constraints. It's choosing which constraints you want to manage yourself. And for many people, that understanding creates a much more realistic perspective. If you want to explore how off-grid systems are structured and how different approaches handle storage, variability, and reliability, there's a structured breakdown in the description. You can also find a practical guide and step-by-step framework that explains how these systems are evaluated in real-world conditions. And as always, the goal isn't to push a lifestyle. It's to understand the system underneath the idea.